If you're trying to control your eating and feeling like a failure, it's not a willpower issue. It's actually a nervous system issue. And once you understand this, food freedom unlocks naturally. Today, I'll be sharing the simple science, the midlife connection, and the solution framework that can help. I'm Jill, if we haven't met, and I help women unlock body and food freedom in midlife and beyond. So take a moment to settle in and we'll begin. So maybe you've noticed that when you're acutely stressed, down, but when you're chronically stressed, it increases. There's maybe more cravings, more emotional eating episodes, more stress eating episodes, and that's actually quite normal. I know that it's easy, if you're familiar with the hormone cortisol, to blame it all on cortisol. And while cortisol does definitely play a role in the stress response and regulating blood sugar levels and cravings, it's not necessarily the bad guy. So our bodies need cortisol to function. It has pretty strong anti-inflammatory properties, and it follows a natural kind of circadian rhythm where it's ideally under ideal nervous system states, it's higher in the morning and then it drops in the evening, and then it kind of starts to restore while we're sleeping, and then it peaks again in the early morning. And it also has spikes if you get stressed, and stress can be either kind of healthy stress, like exercise, for example. We want cortisol to spike a little bit. It's part of that training effect, versus it could also be spiking due to stress that you're not enjoying. So that's all quite normal. And I don't want to demonize cortisol or any hormone for that matter, because that kind of shifts the accountability and the focus to the wrong place that leaves us disempowered. But it is important to just note that it does play a role. And when chronic stress continues, our adrenal glands get really exhausted. Maybe you can think of this as just burnout or adrenal fatigue, and that can kind of lead to a really dysregulated state of hormones that can interrupt us in several ways. There's the direct hormone impact in terms of how it influences eating and cravings. There's the more psychological aspect of feeling unsafe in our body when we're not in that ventral vagal state or that rest and digest state, to just think of it quite simply in terms of nervous system states. It's really hard to feel safe, and it's hard to feel like we're in our body. We are more prone to disassociating from our body in those nervous system states that are not pleasant, whether it's on the fight flight side of things, which is a very sympathetic, or stress, think S, sympathetic stress. That's a very sympathetic nervous system state. Or in a dorsal vagal state, that's where you're also not functioning well. That's like kind of the freeze or shut down or numb out response of nervous system states. So neither of those states are fantastic or a regulated nervous system state for being inside your body so that you can sense your hunger cues, and that you can process emotions, how they need to best be processed so that you're not turning to food always for comfort. So in a nutshell, let me just recap that. Our nervous system has a variety of states. According to polyvagal theory, we can be in a stress response state, which is sympathetic. See, even I can get a little bit bogged down with the science. There's a ventral vagal state, which is kind of ideal in terms of being engaged, feeling safe, feeling wanting that you want to connect socially, both to yourself and others. And then there's the other state, which is the dorsal vagal state. And that's really kind of the shut down, numb out, whoa, just kind of gone offline, disassociated state. So there's no exact one way that you as a unique individual respond to stress. Maybe you tend to be on the shutdown side of things. And in my experience with clients, that can lead to kind of a bit of just real kind of not looking after yourself, maybe just not eating really at all, under eating. And then on the fight flight side of things, that can kind of lead to so much distraction where you're always on the go and always revved up that you're never making like intentional choices. So you might be overeating or undereating, but there's never an intentionality to it either. So neither system is ideal. So we're kind of trying to first interrupt the nervous system dysregulation in a nutshell. And then from that state, we're better able to make appropriate and intentional and focused choices for ourselves regarding food, both in terms of planning and in terms of listening to body cues. So a quick personal story about the stress response and how it can really impact weight gain regardless of eating. So in my 30s, I'm actually going to be 48 this month. And in my late 20s, I guess it was, there was some real major stress going on. My sister was hospitalized and later died from suicide. And this was the first time ever in my life that my body weight felt like it was completely independent of my eating style. And within a very short period of time, I actually was in an acute state of stress, I would say, that then became chronic. But during the acute phase of stress, I gained about 20 pounds. And that was the first time ever in my adult life that there was a real big shift in my body weight and in the way that my body looked, or the way that I perceived that it looked. I, at the time, was working as a wellness coordinator at a university. I was exercising pretty sensibly. I was dancing, I was teaching an intuitive eating course and, doing all the right things supposedly. And it created such a scratch in the record in terms of questioning that kind of notion that it's as simple as calories in, calories out. So I was, personally experiencing that survival stress mode where our bodies hold on and store fat because they don't feel safe. And it was it happened pretty quick, and it was really unsettling for me at that phase in life where I was much more wrapped up in my body image. So I don't know if you've experienced something similar, but if you have, just, recognize what's going on and that there's a sweet spot between kindness and compassion to yourself and also accountability. And that accountability lies in shifting your focus to what you can actually control. And it's not food. Food actually isn't the right place to operate the control. So pause on that note for now. I'll get to that solution framework at the end. And first, I want to touch on, before we get to that, how In midlife, this can really all get ramped up. So there's several reasons. One is that just number of years on the planet. So there's accumulated stressors, right? There's maybe big things going on in life, juggling parenting, juggling aging parents, juggling work and finances, and maybe suddenly being confronted with old systems of navigating life that are not serving you anymore. And your body is literally telling you that doesn't work anymore. Not eating doesn't work anymore. Overeating doesn't work anymore. Micromanaging myself doesn't work anymore. Whatever it is that's not working. And there's, of course, the perimenopause shifts that are going on as well. So that just takes us, if you're female, you have hormonal shifts from the day that you start your period until, the day that you don't have a period anymore. So whether it's PMS driven or perimenopause driven or whatever is driving that kind of dysregulation related to hormones, that can kick up inflammation, and that can be a stress in and of itself. So all of the hormones are related. So kind of to go back to cortisol and estrogen, for example, are both made from cholesterol. So, there's everything functions together, and it's when we kind of get tunnel vision about any one thing or blaming any one thing that we lose sight of what we can actually control. So so just to kind of recap, there is that there's a lot going on in midlife, both circumstantial and then also internally inside our bodies. And then the really crappy thing about that, I feel like, is that it can kick off like a what the F is wrong with me kind of, self-talk, where literally every time that you do something that you recognize is not regulated or the right thing to do, the internal chatter can be literally, my client said this, she had this aha, it's in a comment, she said, really what I need to be asking myself is, I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong, is instead of asking what's wrong with me, I need to be asking myself what's wrong. So just think for a moment, if you're a nurse maybe and you walk into a room and you say to the patient, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Versus what's wrong? How can I help? Those are very different tones, and the impact that has on your nervous system. So the way that you talk to yourself has a direct impact on your nervous system state. So if you're constantly criticizing yourself and talking to yourself in a way that you would not talk to someone else, it keeps you in a dysregulated state. So the whole cycle of an event, and then the hormonal response, and then chronic ongoing both external and internal stressors that keep us chronically dysregulated, and then midlife, all the stuff, right? All the stuff. And then the shame cycle gets kicked up, the guilt, shame cycle of, what's wrong with me versus what's wrong? How can I help? So let that settle in. And now we'll shift to, sorry for the rant there. Now we'll shift to this solution framework. So it's really super simple, but also very challenging. You shift your attention, you shift your focus, you shift your intention to regulating your nervous system first, and you allow your body to come back into a calm, cool, and collected rest and digest state. And from that state, you can, with so much more ease, make really intentional decisions for yourself from a place that is both intentional and flexible. So, the takeaway message from that is that your hormones are not separate from you. They are coachable, just like your brain and your cognitive aspects are coachable, and your body is coachable, which your nervous system is literally your brain and body connected. That's what vagus nerve tone is. Vagus nerve tone is literally good connection between brain and body in a nice regulated state that can either be a little bit in the direction of stimulus if that's what you need, or down regulation if that's what you need. So where I come in with all of this is that I'm able to connect through my expertise and experience with movement, and movement that's somatic by nature, meaning that we focus on the inner experience. And that somatic work, whether it's through a body scan meditation, or maybe a seated nervous system reset, or more kind of real full body movement through a somatic movement practice, or good grounded Pilates or something like that. Those are all tools that are body-based tools that speak directly to your physiology to help bring you out of either freeze or flight or fawn. I'm not going to go into that in depth here, but I'll make a separate video about that. And how those body-based approaches help bring you back to a nervous system state that's more regulated and just feels better. We don't want to disassociate from it because it feels better. It's kind of that simple. There's, the really, one really easy way to think of this is that when you practice being in your body by body-based practices, you get better at it, just like anything. And so you can ride the waves of dysregulation better, and you can return to a state of homeostasis more easily. And that's really what resilience is, right? Not pretending that shit isn't going to happen, but being able to gather yourself, gather your tools, gather your resources, and lean into what you need to get yourself back online. So that's also not to say that body-based practices are the only way to regulate your nervous system. I'll also be offering some coaching, education, and coaching is a really important component. And also just dealing with life directly, which is its own topic unto itself, which we'll dig into a bit more as we move forward. So this was a lot, I recognize it, but you deserve to have information, you deserve to feel empowered, and you deserve to understand how this is all connected. So again, if you're trying to control food, it's a losing battle. If you're trying to control your body weight, it's a losing battle. If you're trying to, with care, ask yourself, what do I need? What's the problem? Well, chances are you need to shift your focus to looking after yourself and getting yourself into a more regulated nervous system state for healing. And, if you haven't had an opportunity to try one of my practices, I'll leave that for you in the description and on the end card. So I'll recommend the 10-minute body scan for anxiety and emotional eating. That's a really easy entry point. You don't need any special equipment. You can just be wherever you're at and just let that kind of infuse your whole being and shift your mindset and your body into, what needs focus and what deserves focus. So I hope that that settles in. Let me know if you have any questions. I do respond to all comments at the moment. That's the gift of being a small channel. So look after yourself and take care. Bye for now.